Hi, this video is going to walk you through the basics of what an ecosystem is. Make sure you're following along with your notes and you're writing down all the basic facts that you find on this slide. So what's an ecosystem? It's all the living and non-living parts of an environment. So if you look at this picture, this is an example of an ecosystem. You can see we have abiotic factors, and abiotic factors is a fancy word for non-living things. So let's take a look at some of the abiotic factors here. We have air, we have our temperature, we have soil, water. These are all non-living things that are part of the environment or the ecosystem. We also have biotic factors. The prefix bio means life, so biotic means living factors. And you can see we have animals like birds and deer, we have grass, we have fish. And an ecosystem is consisting of those two things because the non-living things, or the abiotic factors, interact with the biotic factors, or the living things. They depend on each other. Today's lesson, we're going to be focusing on the biotic factors mainly, and we're going to come back to the abiotic factors and see how they interact on another day. The first type of biotic factor, one of the most important in an ecosystem, are the producers. Producers are plants or other organisms that are able to make their own food through photosynthesis. So we have plants and trees, and in the ocean we have producers like kelp. This is a picture of kelp. There's seaweed that does photosynthesis and provides nutrients and oxygen for the creatures in the water. We also have what we call the consumers. Consumers are living things that consume or eat other living things for food and energy. So all of these consumers here, such as the giraffe, panda, the caterpillar, koala, and the tortoise, they are a type of consumer called an herbivore. Herbivores can only eat producers or plants for energy. And then we have another type of consumer called the omnivore. Omnivores eat both producers and consumers. These are examples of omnivores. Bears are omnivores because they eat fish and also plant products like berries. Raccoons, birds are omnivores, gorillas, and actually we are omnivores too. And one of the ways that we can tell is our teeth. If you notice, we have a sharp canine tooth right here, and that is a type of tooth that's used to tear at meat. But in the back, we have flatter teeth, and those are type of teeth that typically herbivores use to crush plant products. So we have both types of teeth, so we are omnivores. And last but not least, we have a type of consumer called a carnivore. Carnivores only eat meat, or they eat other consumers, such as herbivores, omnivores, or other carnivores. They're usually the top of the food chain, and all these animals that you see here, they are carnivores. Now, we have another type of living thing that's not a producer, not a consumer. They're called decomposers. These are living things that eat things that are dead or wastes from animals for food. Now, you might think that's really gross, but they actually are one of the most important parts of an ecosystem, because if we didn't have these decomposers, our ecosystems would be filled with dead things and wastes, and they would just be lying there forever, which would not be very pretty. And they do a really important thing where they break down and recycle nutrients back into the soil so that the plants can use them again. And they're a very important part of the cycle of life. Now that we've learned about all the different biotic factors in an ecosystem, we can take a look at how they interact with each other. There's something called a food chain. This is a picture of a food chain. And basically, it's a diagram that shows the order in which living things eat food. So, the grasshopper will eat the plant, the bird will eat the grasshopper, the snake will eat the bird, and the owl will eat the snake. Now, a food web is a little more complicated than the food chain that you saw earlier over here. And the reason is that food webs will show multiple relationships, not just one relationship. You can see that the food chain only shows one animal interacting with another animal in a linear fashion, whereas food webs, they actually show multiple relationships of one animal to other animals. So, for example, you see this Arctic cod, which is a type of fish. This fish is food for several animals in this food web. So you can see there's an arrow pointing to the Arctic birds. So it's food for them. Also, the harbor seals eat them, and also the ringed seals eat them. So you can see one animal interacts with three different animals in this food web, whereas in the food chain, each animal interacts with only one. So that's the main difference between a food web and a food chain. A food web is a more accurate picture of an ecosystem because in reality, um, each animal does interact with more animals in the ecosystem, but a food chain is really simple and only shows one interaction. So this food web is a more realistic picture of what happens in each ecosystem. One thing that I do want to point out with these food webs is the fact that the arrow points towards the animal that eats it. So it's not that the red-tailed hawk um, eats the grouse and the arrow points this way. Notice how the arrow is pointing towards the animal that eats the grouse. So you're going to have a homework assignment where you have to draw your own food web. Make sure that you are drawing the arrows the correct way and you're pointing the arrow towards the consumer that eats whatever animal is there. Okay? The other thing with this slide is all the animals here depend on each other for survival. If any one of these animals die or become extinct, it really affects the rest of the food web because you can see all the animals are connected through the food web.